Welcome to Aligned to Impact, the podcast where conscious leadership meets bold entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Summer Huntington, and each week we dive deep with founders, innovators, and thought leaders who are rewriting the rules of business from the inside out. Here we talk mindset, brand, content, culture, the real stuff behind building a legacy-driven business that doesn't burn you out. No filters, no fluff, just real conversations that inspire aligned action and intentional impact. If you're a visionary leader ready to create with purpose, grow with integrity, and lead with your heart, you're in the right place. Let's get into it.
You know, a lot of times I'm just kind of focused on day to day, just because, again, we do work with such a high acuity population. So I guess the best way I could answer that is immediate kind of goals are just really fine tuning our DBT program, our primary outpatient mental health program, and just, continuing to refine that. And grow our adolescent program, and expand probably into children.
Welcome, Drew Brezinitsky, to the podcast. Excited to have you here. So Drew is based out of Florida, and he is the CEO at Beachside Recovery Interventions and Consulting. Drew, I'd love for you just to introduce yourself to the podcast and our listeners and tell us a little bit about how you got into this work.
Sure. Thanks, Summer. It's really nice to be here with you. Appreciate the invite. How I got into this field is, like most therapists, kind of through my own story. Just kind of took an interest in the field. I grew up with a single sick mother who was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease when I was 9, and given a certain time to live, she kind of developed depression, other mental health disorders, and co-occurring disorders with regard to substance use, maladaptive coping for that comorbid medical mental health stuff. A lot of bullying as a kid. She had kind of a bad picker in men, so I saw a lot of violence and experienced a lot of violence in a variety of ways. So that kind of, that lived experience kind of gave me an interest in the helping profession. So I started going into the field through, school with a major in psychology for my undergrad. And then I added human services, and then went for my master's in clinical mental health counseling and marriage and family therapy. While I was doing school and working in the field in a variety of other capacities, I took a job as a clinical outreach representative for a now debunked treatment center in South Florida. I came up in a really ethical area and had really ethical mentors in the field, and this was the first job I ever had where I was kind of exposed to the kind of ugly side of this field or this industry. And I worked for the program, and we had a patient reach out to us from another facility who was interested in coming into our PHP program from a residential program that was not associated with us. When that happened, there was kind of a turf war between, the treatment centers over the patient. I kind of bowed out of it, escalated it to my supervisor, and long story short, the parents got kind of tired of the two treatment centers fighting over their daughter, and they put her in a non-accredited sober living in South Florida, and she overdosed and died. So at that kind of moment, I took my work issue laptop, cell phone, withdrew my last paycheck from my bank, and drove south, because I'm in Central Florida, to the facility and dropped all that off and said, I hope you can kind of live with her death on your conscience. And I walked out, and I, at that moment, vowed to help parents and loved ones ethically navigate an inherently broken system and field. And that's kind of how my business was born. I wasn't at the point where I could do individual counseling yet because I hadn't finished school. So we started out really just doing interventions and helping families navigate a broken system.
Wow, that is a very, very touching story. Thank you for bringing that up to our listeners. Yeah. It's really unique work that you are doing. I've been interviewing quite a few mental health, people in the mental health field, and your story is really unique. What you guys do is really unique. I'd love for you just to kind of walk us through, for the listener that maybe doesn't quite understand the niche or the specialty that you're in, specifically working with folks in jails or folks that are, convicted felons. Can you just walk us through a big picture and just kind of explain what you do?
Sure. So with regard to the jail stuff, in addition to the story I just told you, around that time I had been volunteering in our local county jail. Just again, kind of helping people navigate that system, right? Like I have some attorney friends in the area and they kind of just needed some referrals and some assessments of some of their clients. And, so I was doing a couple of those and I got nominated for, the Pastor Mark Swallow Award in Brevard County, which was, a gentleman who used to do a similar thing, a gentleman in recovery. And, he passed away, and so I got nominated for this award, and it put me in front of, like, every judge and private attorney, public defender within the 18th Judicial Court. Got kind of busy. So that's kind of what prompted that. So what we do with regard to the criminal justice or the forensic evaluations is we go into the jails, all throughout the state of Florida. I'm also qualified in Montana, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee. And we do super thorough forensic evaluations. So mental health evaluations, substance use evaluations, personality inventories, other types of testing. And we come to, we develop a clinical impression. Based on that clinical impression, we begin to do case conceptualization. What kind of makes us unique about that is, I'm actually a convicted felon, so I understand the criminal justice system in a way that other licensed clinicians just simply do not understand. So that means I understand downward departures, open pleas to the court, different types of motions, score sheets. So what that enables me to do is formulate a plan for our patients that not only addresses the clinical, but helps to mitigate the legal as much as possible so that it does not impact their lives as much as possible, right? And then also do that in a way that addresses all psychosocial factors. So do they need a GED? Do they need anger management classes? Do they have kids? What are their finances? So we take all three of those things into consideration and develop an individualized treatment plan that would be pleasing to the court, and execute that plan. And we stay with our patients from start to finish. So that's kind of one of the primary things we do. We're an outpatient mental health practice, so we do regular outpatient mental health counseling. We also have a true dialectal behavioral therapy program called Beachside Recovery Center for Trauma and Anxiety, and it's a 7-day-a-week outpatient program, DBT model, that addresses complex trauma and associated personality traits. So things like borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, things like that are really rooted in trauma. And the goal of that is independent stabilization and independent functioning within the community. Rather than just going off to a residential, learning how to operate from a healthy place in the community. We also do interventions. We do a lot of family coaching, peer support, and we also do safe transports for the interventions, and we also transport for our court cases.
Wow, that's incredible. And it sounds like you guys are a full start to finish service organization, really doing that deep work for your clients. Yeah. So I'm curious, you as founder and CEO, what is a typical day in the life for you, wearing all the hats?
That's interesting. So our week varies. For using this week as an example, Monday I was doing a in-office forensic evaluation. So that's someone that's out of custody, comes into the office, so did a forensic evaluation, and then had sessions after that. Tuesday I'm in session back to back with just outpatient, doing outpatient counseling. Same with Wednesday. Thursdays are usually our in-court days. We're usually in a courtroom or in a jail. And Thursday nights I run group for our DBT program. Fridays we try to keep it a little relaxed and do treatment team and discuss all of our patients and make sure we're working as a team collaboratively to address everything that's going on and make sure we're all up to date with what's going on. And then in between that, maybe flying to another state to do an intervention or be in court. So
sounds like a very full plate. What is your leadership style with leading your team?
So sometimes people don't agree with it. I always want my team to feel empowered. I want them to feel supported. So anyone that I bring on, first of all, I've never actually placed an ad for a team member. Everything's just kind of happened and come to me naturally, which I really love. And when we meet, the first thing I kind of ask is, their style of counseling and kind of what brings them into this field. And I always let them know that I want them to feel supported. So I always let people know, listen, my goal would be if I'm going to bring you on, I want you to kind of be here long term. Like, if you want to move or anything, the first thing I want you to want to say is, hey, I'm moving to, California. I want to open a beachside recovery, and I will support you in that. So really people that want to grow with the business and the mission of, the type of care we provide, helping them feel supported in school. We want to be a teaching practice. So, I say, I always tell my team, like, we're a family here, right? Like, we're colleagues and professionals first, but we're a family. Like, whoever's here, I support fully in whatever, their endeavors are.
That's beautiful. Yeah, so you're looking to expand in other states then? Is that something on the docket for the coming years, or what's that look like?
Hopefully. I mean, I'm kind of believe in walking before you can run, right? Like, we've grown from me working out of an office at a treatment center I worked at to getting our first brick and mortar location here in Satellite Beach. Then we opened an office in Ocala, which is where I went through treatment years ago and have, a lot of connections in the community. Then we opened up our second office here for the Center for Trauma and Anxiety, and sometimes have conversations with people who we have a lot of followers and people that really, are excited about what we're doing, that kind of work in the space. So, if that opportunity presented itself, it's definitely something I would have a conversation about.
Nice. Well, I definitely see the growth. It's just such a niche that you're so passionate about it. You have the experience. You have all the systems. Like, it's, I only see positive growth for you guys.
Thank you.
So I would love to hear a little bit about the clients that you serve. Specifically, you work with some pretty high needs individuals. Tell me a bit about the common barriers they face, and how does your team help them move forward with dignity and strength?
So a lot of the barriers, general barriers that come along with mental health, like accessibility, financial accessibility, things like that, but specifically with regard to our population, specifically the Center for Trauma and Anxiety, actually our forensic stuff too, is stigma, right? Like, there's a huge stigma around the criminal justice population. Often passed over for jobs, lack of support, things like that. So the stigma around the criminal justice piece. Additionally, the Center for Trauma and Anxiety, like I said, is geared toward complex trauma and associated personality traits. And if we put that officially, clinically, that would be, like I said, borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder. They would be the four major ones. And there's a huge stigma around these personality traits, or kind of the names, right? The official diagnosis. Especially in 2025, these terms being stigmatized and that stigma being perpetuated on social media, right? Specifically with, like, relationships, right? Like, one person's always, she's borderline, and the other person's, well, he's a narcissist, right? Well, really all that does is perpetuate that stigma, because truly the people that exhibit these personality traits are just deeply hurting people, and they don't know what to do with that pain, and it shows up in ways that affect interpersonal functioning, impact, emotional regulation and things like that, qualities that make it that are necessary to functioning, right, in society. So the stigma with regard to the population we work with is really the biggest barrier for them. One of the ways we kind of challenge that with our forensic population is we're with them from start to finish. Like I said, I'm a convicted felon. I know the criminal justice system. I know what their needs are. When I was on probation and didn't have a license and was going to school, I would be in class and I would have to look at the guy sitting next to me saying, hey, can I give you $5 to drive me to probation? Which is, kind of embarrassing, right? If you're in that moment, in that mindset, in that time. So kind of knowing that feeling, like personally knowing what that's like, to try to do everything to stay out of trouble, to address your mental health, to do everything that the state's requiring of you. So I think that personal experience, that lived experience, gives me and my staff and I a unique perspective when working with our patients and the ability to really be there for them. So do you need a ride to probation? Not enabling them, right? But if they legitimately need a ride to probation, if they need a reference for a job, if they need help with interviewing or writing a resume, we're with them through that whole process from the time we see them in the jail cell to the time they're released, go into treatment. We check in with their treatment providers. We kind of keep on top of them, making sure, hey, why is this person not in the GED class yet? When we referred them, we said they need a GED. Can we get them in the GED program? Really just kind of following up. And then, when they're done with everything and they've gone through treatment, we're still here. For example, one of my peer support specialists, his name's Pat. So if he ever sees this, proud of you, Pat. He was one of my first forensic patients. I want to say that was 2017. He's still sober to this day, and he now works for me. So we're willing to go as far. I tell my guys, dude, do this for you, and if I'll give you a job someday, So I feel like that's how we kind of support that when it comes to our Center for Trauma and Anxiety. I think it's also, there's two schools of thought in psychology and when you go to grad school on self-disclosure. And they're both right. One school of thought is never use it. And I understand that perspective because some people that get in the field tend to make it about them, and it should always be about the patient. So some cases, some people should stick to that perspective. I believe in the second, which is only use self-disclosure in the best interest of the patient. If it helps build rapport, if it helps them to feel supported. And I think a lot of our success in the DBT program is we approach it like we're human. And, we've experienced, on some level, we're experiencing, right? And really using limited, appropriate self-disclosure to build a really, really strong therapeutic relationship and just help people to feel supported in that way, to kind of challenge that stigma. Because when their counselor is able to say, yeah, that resonates with me, right? Here's why, appropriately, that really makes them feel not alone, right? Because they kind of look at the counselor as, someone who's accomplished something or achieved something, right? So then they feel empowered. So I think that's a big way we're able to do that.
Yeah, I'm seeing elements of advocacy intermixed with empowerment, intermixed with just the social aspect of having peers that have gone through similar things and professionals that have gone through similar things.
Yeah.
What major shifts are you seeing right now in the mental health and addiction recovery space?
So one thing that I'm growing increasingly concerned about is it's kind of a hybrid. It has to do with grad schools and I think a post-COVID world. as I see grad schools are cultivating, in my honest opinion, lazy and incompetent therapists, who sometimes view patients as nothing more than a paycheck. So what I'm talking about is like those therapists that, graduate, they don't work in like a community funded facility or, a community based program. So they don't really get that down and dirty experience, right? That that community based experience. And they just kind of go open up an LLC and do like telehealth from their bedroom in their pajamas while they're wearing a cardigan, and just say, "How are you feeling today?" That that's okay for some patients, but it's really not the essence of counseling, in my opinion. There's appropriate challenging of patients, right? They come to counseling because they need to be challenged in some way sometimes, right? It's different for every person. But I just think there's too many yes men counselors in the field. That's just my personal opinion. But that's something that I run into frequently, where I have patients in my office that went somewhere else and they just say, all my last counselor did was ask me how I was feeling. They asked me how was my week? How am I feeling? How do you feel about that? There was no kind of give and take, right? In addition to that, there's a lack of supervision for the right reasons, I think. Finding qualified, ethical, clinically competent supervision with a diverse experience is very difficult and very limited. So that's something that's difficult too. One of the positive shifts I'm seeing is people starting to try to work together a little more, I think, in collaboration from a variety of areas in the field. So social work, human services, counseling, marriage and family, community-based programs. That's something we really like doing, is we actually partner with nonprofits in town. We try to give them a discounted rate that's consistent with the grants that they get from what our normal, everyday prices are, so that their population can afford and can get quality, ethical, clinically competent care. For example, we work with one where they were going to Brevard Health Alliance. Brevard Health Alliance is great. They're an awesome organization, but their population was only getting 30-minute sessions one time a month when they really needed hour sessions once a week, So I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but those are some thoughts in that area.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it sounds like you guys have full comprehensive services. You have a team that's very, very competent, and you're really striving to raise the bar when it comes down to it. Yeah. And advocating for that too. And I appreciate the call at it, or that maybe it's a call in for people that are, not asking deep enough questions. So when you are working with a person that has one of those personality traits that you described, or maybe your team, how is your style of care different, or what are some approaches that you would use that might help some of these more challenging individuals?
I think kind of the willingness goes back to the, sit in the corner asking how you're feeling today, right? The willingness to roll up your sleeves and get dirty, right? There's an example would be, and I get it, right? In grad school and, in the field, they push boundaries. Obviously we need boundaries in the field, right? But one of the things for our DVT program is my whole staff they all have work cells. These are individuals that need some extra support. So kind of what I tell them is hey, don't call me at 3 a.m. to tell me it's dark outside. But if you are struggling and you have no one else and you need to talk to someone and it's serious, and, call us, right? I will answer the phone at 3 a.m. Again, not, to tell me it's dark outside, right? But if you need the support, we're here. And it's interesting because the people in the field that would speak against that I would love for them to know that when I kind of put it to my patients like that, they don't abuse that, right? But they appreciate that we're there for them, that they know we're a text or a phone call away if they need serious de-escalation, right? So I think things like that, like for one of our forensic patients, he was one of our state-funded cases, and they're often indigent and sometimes, don't have a roof over their head or, car drive. And the attorney is like, I don't know where he is. And I'm like, well, how am I supposed to evaluate him? And she's like, well, I know of 2 homeless encampments, and this is in Ocala, Florida, that he kind of frequents. Myself, another one of my staff, went to the homeless encampment, walked through it, found him, took him to a local Hardee's where we found a private area and did our evaluation. So I think it's just thinking outside the box, being more accessible and willing to go the extra step while still maintaining ethics and boundaries, but just thinking critically about what that looks like.
Yeah, you're definitely going the extra mile and showing that compassion and that support that goes a long way. And when you show that level of compassion, they start to care about themselves a little bit more and see that someone really cares.
Correct. Yep.
Awesome. Switching gears to your current business, I'm curious what's working well for you and your team right now, and what continues to be a challenge in the work that you do?
What's working well for my team right now? I think just the cohesiveness of our team. We all really, really, really care about our patients. We care about each other, and I think when patients see a team that works well together and they care for one another, they know that they're going to be cared for, right? I think, supporting my team, the question you asked earlier, I make it a requirement for all my therapists to be in therapy. If you see a therapist who does not have a therapist, find a new therapist, right? Because we hold a lot of stuff. And so I think, primarily what's working well for us is the cohesiveness of our team, supporting one another, supporting each other's mental health, and that shows through to the patients. I'm sorry, your second question was what?
Second question is just what continues to be a challenge or frustrating in the work that you do?
So, kind of on that note, just finding ethically, clinically competent therapists. Like I said, going back to grad schools, in my opinion, they're just not setting people up for success for the real world, right? Like real world counseling, real world advocacy. Yes, you learn book stuff, but that's why I say everyone should work in a community-based program first, before even being allowed to have a private practice. Just those things, and lack of kind of drive. Another thing that's a big thing is when the way things are set up with counseling, like you go to grad school, you put in for a provisional license, 2 years later, and within that 2 years you pass your boards, 2 years later you're a licensed counselor. People are kind of coming out of grad school with these like egos that haven't worked in community-based programs, that think, and really maybe are in it for them, as a sense to help themselves and not others, Additionally, boards, for example, myself, I'm a convicted felon, as we stated, so like going through my process with the board was very, very challenging. But then you have other people because I have a arrest record, right? So they dug into every little aspect and tried to deny me my license, which I ended up having to sue for, which I got my license, thankfully to the judge. But you have people who come out and just because they don't have a criminal record, aren't vetted like that, and just sail through and get their license, and they have all sorts of things that are red flags or make them a danger or unable to practice with reasonable skill and safety. So I think the vetting process is also, people with my background should obviously be vetted. Like, I agree with that 100%. But it doesn't make sense that there's this board that, is responsible for helping people, but the people that have been where their patients are have a more difficult time doing something they're passionate about, who in some ways maybe have the tools to help in a different way, right? In a more creative, critical thinking way. So that's something that I find to be challenging in the field.
Thanks for going into a little bit more detail about that. It's important to just put it out there too, because the only way to fix a broken system is to start bringing awareness around it, being, and continuing to lead like you are, and fix the broken system little pieces at a time. So with so many moving parts in your business, which outcomes or impact measurements are you most focused on and improving right now at Brick?
I think because we do so much, sometimes, just general systems are kind of, a little bit lost, just because we are kind of, all over the place. We may be in the middle of one thing and get a call that we have to go handle something, quickly. So kind of just honestly general systems like that. We've been over the past few years measuring our outcomes with our forensic cases, and I'm really pleased with that because we've had like an 82% success rate. And the way we define success rate is no recidivism, sober, and mentally stable, like taking medications and things like that. And I think what really contributes to that is our start to finish kind of outlook and staying with our patients through the whole process and them having that extra support. So I would like to continue growing that and kind of seeing how we can support them more, and kind of carrying that into like our DBT program.
Nice. That's excellent. So where do you want to be in the next 6 to 12 months from now?
A lot of times I'm just kind of focused on day to day, just because again, we do work with such a high acuity population. So I guess the best way I could answer that is immediate kind of goals are just really fine tuning our DBT program, our primary outpatient mental health program, and just, continuing to refine that, and grow our adolescent program, and expand probably into children. So with complex trauma and cluster B stuff, your brain's fully developed at 26, right? So we're really passionate about, with our adult program, it's more about stabilization, independent functioning in the community. With our adolescents, it's really about intervening before the brain's fully developed and helping them, educating them, right, on interpersonal effectiveness, distress tolerance, family systems. And I'd like to translate that into children too, not just adolescents that are, because children experience the same trauma, right? Complex trauma, developmental trauma. So carrying that into children and developing a program there. And then, like we said earlier, maybe some expansion throughout Florida and maybe beyond.
Yeah, I think the business model that you're building with all of your systems, your high level of experience, it definitely seems like a really scalable model when you get there and when the time's right. And you're building out the team from organically, which is like grassroots and organic, which is great. So just to kind of wrap things up, if someone's listening today and they're worried about a loved one or they feel totally lost in navigating mental health or addiction, maybe they're one of the people that you serve, what's the first thing that you want them to know?
So, the first thing I would say is like, you're definitely not alone. Right? Like, you're not alone. There's millions of people out there that are experiencing that don't have your experience, but are experiencing similar things, right? And the kind of first step is reaching out for help. And oftentimes that's hard. People find that difficult because they see a lot of shame in that or feel a lot of shame in that. But kind of, to quote Brene Brown, who's like one of my favorite clinicians and researchers, what you're exhibiting when you reach out is vulnerability, right? And vulnerability is essentially like the antidote to shame, right? So that's really the worst step, first step being vulnerable and just reaching out.
And knowing that you're not alone.
Yeah.
I'm tearing up. Your interview has been so touching, Drew. Drew, where can we find out, for those of our listeners that are in Florida, where can we find you, your website, your socials, and how can we stay connected and support?
So our website is www.bric, B-R-I-C, the, T-H-E, stigma, STIGMA.com. Our Facebook is Bric the Stigma. Our Instagram is Bric the Stigma, I believe.
Great.
Sorry.
I'll plug them all in the show notes.
And then we're located in Sally Beach, Florida, and I'll also have an office in Ocala, Florida.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Drew, for being on the show and describing a little bit more about what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you for what you're building with your podcast and the questions you're asking, because they're important questions.
Thanks, Drew. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Aligned Impact. I'm truly grateful to have you here in this growing community of leaders, innovators, and conscious change makers. Check the show notes for all the links and resources we mentioned today, and you can explore more of my work and programs over at FlowShala.com, or connect with me on social media at Summer Huntington and YouTube as well for behind the scenes movement inspiration and business tips. Stay tuned for more episodes of Aligned Impact that inspire you to lead with intention, get empowered, and create aligned impact in your life and your community.